with some of the other attorneys who were.
Can't go to trial because the guy's so bad.
Right. Certain officers make arrests and they drop cases because they know that the officer will be torn apart on the stand. So in Connecticut, I found out that we don't have a Brady list. After that, we came back and asked questions.
For the people on the other side of the camera, in Connecticut, they also refer to the Brady list as a Giglio list.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there's evidently a state case that requires this to take place. In addition to the federal case, Brady, there was a state case, Giglio.
I imagine every state has its own version of Brady in its
and I
state
think
case
that when
law.
it really hit home to your law firm, okay?
Well, it was in early 2014. We were in New London. We were getting ready to go to trial. And the prosecutor said to me, let's go into the judge's chamber and talk. We went
This is in New London.
In New London. For the first time, I found out, after the case had been pending maybe 2 years, I was a second attorney on the case. For the first time, I found out that the arresting officer, who happened to be a state trooper, had been under administrative suspension for about a year. He had been placed under administrative suspension in February 2013, and his police powers taken away. And the case just pended and pended and pended, hoping that my client would plead out and we'd never know the difference. But then when it was ready to go to trial and this officer would have had to come in and testify, then all of a sudden I was given the exculpatory information.
The client originally was going to take a plea.
Right.
But then something was said to the local papers. He got pissed off, went in to open it up.
Yep.
And that's when he said, I want a trial. And the prosecutor says, well, we're going to have a problem because the officer will not appear in court to testify. Now,
he'll take the fifth.
Right, he'll plead the fifth. Now, what I'm saying is that particular state trooper had an issue of untruthfulness in his file. In other words, when asked, did you take photographs or do you have photographs of a female in your cruiser wearing part of your uniform? I guess he must have said no.
But also, he had the issue of the fake tickets.
The bogus tickets.
Motor vehicle tickets. And if that doesn't go to credibility, I don't know what was.
Well,
and that prosecutor allowed or would have allowed my client to be convicted without turning over
ever disclosing
that exculpatory
information to you.
But for my client opted to go to trial, and they had to tell us.
So now, every lawyer should ask for the Brady list, or is this officer on Brady anywhere, okay, or Giglio, but it's bullshit.
So I wrote to the Chief State's Attorney's Office in Connecticut, Kevin Kane,
yeah,
and I described what had happened in New London,
yeah,
went into detail about it. I even, in a footnote, put an example that we had from the Berlin Police Department at a firearms hearing we went to, where they did a risk warrant for the seizure of firearms, and we found out by going to hearing that the officer who wrote the warrant was not involved in the investigation at all.
At all.
I asked him why he wrote the warrant. He said that he was known as the writer. The writer.
And let me explain how that works. A patrolman does an arrest warrant application. He has to submit it for review to a supervisor before it can get to a prosecutor. And then it's sent back. And then it goes up and it's sent up to the next time, say a lieutenant. Lieutenant doesn't like what the sergeant did, he sends it back. And it can be done several times. But if you have one person designated in your department to write up applications for arrest warrants, and he says, I know what the hot button words are, I know what the hot button phrases are, I know what to put in there, I won't miss a trick, and I'll do it this way, because they may not know how to do it correctly. They may put something in that is exculpatory, and the writer's job is to make sure there's no exculpatory information that would harm the department.
So the problem in that is warrants are sworn to under oath. The officer who writes the warrant has to swear under oath to the truth of it. And in writing the warrant, this officer, who had nothing to do with the investigation, so how does he know what's true or not true, relies on his fellow officers. Do you know what's wrong with that? If there's a lie in the warrant, you can't hold the fellow officers responsible because they didn't swear to it. And how do you hold the writer responsible when he relied on somebody else and wasn't even there? So it's a way of shielding police officers from being held accountable for perjury in their statements and warrants. And that needs to stop. This relying on fellow officers, number one, you don't know if the fellow officer's telling the truth or not. So you shouldn't be relying on other people when you're signing something under oath. They should be signing something under oath. Or whatever you put in your warrant should be based on what they signed under oath, and you put the information together. But you have to have the person with the knowledge making the statement under oath, so if it's a lie, you can hold them responsible. That would be like, I have a criminal defense. I represent a criminal defendant, and they want a statement from him, right? And I say, well, no, let's leave him there, and I'll come in and make the statement, and I'll rely on what he told me. And then it turns out not to be true. Well, it's not my client that signed off on the statement, and I was just relying on him, so who are you going to hold accountable for that? Nobody.
I don't think it works when it says, it is my understanding that someone claims that.
Right.
You know.
Well, that's what you do when you write letters, right?
I know, but what I'm trying to say is this, is that warrants. The job of the report writer is to make sure that no derogatory information comes in. If the officer has made some kind of an admission about why he discharged his firearms, or why he hit the accused, or why he did something during the arrest process, okay, the report writer is never going to let that go forward. He's never going to put it into the file.
So how do you attack a warrant? It's very difficult. Unlike a on-site arrest where a person's arrested without warrant and a judge finds probable cause, it's easier to attack that probable cause because a judge had not condoned it prior to the arrest. But when it's a warrant, there's a case called Franks versus Delaware where you can attack the warrant and what's in the four corners, either if positive information is left out, which is inculpatory, it's good, or exculpatory, or if negative information is left out.
There's a caller on the phone.
Okay, well, do you want to take a caller and see how this works with our new setup?
Okay, I got to do speakerphone.
Okay.
Hello?
Hello?
Oh,
Yeah. Good. Just check. Now there's gonna be a
the iPod. I had you guys on. Sorry.
there's gonna be
He
a
sounds
delay.
like he knows what he's
There's
doing.
gonna be a delay. You got to turn your computer volume down.
Hi, how are you doing? This is Summary Judgment. Thanks for calling.
Thank you for having me.
So do you
How
have...
are you today?
Good. Do you have any input about the situation and police accountability, Brady list, or anything else?
Yeah, I agree with that Brady listing. I just turned it on and started catching it. That's why I went to call it in, because I live in Pennsylvania, and I didn't know if they actually had one. It's just like the first time I ever heard. I know cops lie all the time, but I didn't know there was an actual list if they get caught lying and going on. And I just want to know, maybe did they have one in Pennsylvania that I can try to look?
I remember the conversation we had when we first learned of the word Brady. We were at an NRA sit-down with a bunch of people, and they started talking about Washington, D.C., had a Brady list, and I want to say Philadelphia was in that category.
An attorney from Philadelphia was there.
I believe an attorney from Philadelphia said that the Philadelphia Police Department has a Brady list. Now, I think that what it does is it leaves it up to each individual law enforcement agency to either have or not have a Brady list at their own risk.
Well, I think it depends on how the court system and how the police system is set up in each state, how the Brady list is actually compiled. But that's a good question. I would tend to think Pennsylvania does because of that conversation, but I don't know for
You
sure.
can Google it, Brady List, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, and look it up, and if they don't have one, they should.
Now, what was your first name?
Rob.
Roth?
Roth?
Rob. R-O-B.
Rob.
Oh, Rob, I'm sorry. Rob, I want to say something to somebody other than Rachel, so see if you can agree with me.
Okay.
There's a lot of talk about civilian review boards.
Yeah.
And in one state, they want to have all minority children, teenagers, on the civilian review board to review police conduct. I mean, that to me is...
Are you sure it's a state? Maybe it's
No, it's a
smaller-
city within a state.
Okay.
Minorities?
Okay.
Excuse me?
Is it just minorities?
It's... You have to read the article, and children on civilian review boards. If you Google that, I'm sure you'll find it. But
yeah,
here...
I believe we should have civilian
Let me...
review board. I think, if you're 18 and older, just like the vote and all that stuff, yes, you should be able to. The young teenagers, no. And I believe it should be every ethnicity. Because officers just don't, they're everywhere. It's every race, everything. So I think every race should be involved.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And from the age of 18 and on. That's my personal opinion, but someone might differ.
Let me finish my thought while you're on the phone.
Okay, sorry.
And don't apologize.
In criminal law, there are misdemeanor small crimes and felony big crimes. Most people are aware of that.
Yes.
Okay. I believe that one of the things that is needed in this country is a national, statewide network of federal civilian review boards. Like they could have one in Connecticut, they could have 4 in California because California is big. They could have 3 or 4 in Florida, whatever. But what would happen is this. Civilian makes a complaint to the Internal Affairs Department of his town, police department. They must immediately refer that IA to the Civilian Review Board and to a federal Civilian Review Board
Yeah.
for review. And in serious cases that involve injury or death, it automatically goes to the federal Civilian Review Board, which would have the authority to submit the case to the local U.S. attorney.
I agree.
There are going to be a lot of suggestions and recommendations going on in the future, and that may be one of the things that take shape. Although I could see certain people objecting to having the federal government so involved in our local and state politics.
Rachel, I agree with you, but if we leave it up to every nook and cranny police department to have a civilian review board, in other words, in the state of Connecticut, you have Hartford, New Haven, Bridgeport, Waterbury, New London, I don't know what else, Meriden, these big towns. But up in the Northwest Hills, you have little towns. And those towns can't have a civilian review board, but the city of Hartford can.
Mm-hmm.
But the city of Hartford depends on volunteers, and a lot of those volunteers that come to a civilian review board are using it as a stepping stone to a higher position in government. They put it on their political resume. Oh, I rode on the volunteer ambulance for 2 years. Oh, I attended this church. Oh, I was on the civilian review board for 3 years. Okay? You got to have somebody who's compensated for being a member, and it needs to be federally controlled because the states and the towns want, it's called home rule. They want to control everything that happens within their borders.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Home rule.
What do you think,
That is
Rob?
tough.
Yeah. What do you think?
That is tough. I can see arguments on both parties, on both points.
Right.
with that, and I do agree with there's probably going to be a lot of backlash because of all these small cities and small towns that, kind of want to run it their own way, I guess you would say.
Mm-hmm.
And I could also see his point where we definitely do need some type of state or federal because these guys that go and ladies that go onto these review boards, sometimes, I'm not saying all of them, are a lot of police supporters. So it's like they don't really see that cops do anything wrong, per se.
Right. Rob, perhaps, are you a first-time listener or watcher of our show?
Honestly, no. I love you guys. Like, I follow, like, J.C. Clayford, News Now Houston, stuff like that. I follow you guys all the time. This was just honestly my first time ever calling. I think what you guys do is great. The information you guys give out is great. I always try to look up a lot of the information you guys give out because I'm new to this, I guess you call it, like police accountability, auditing world.
Mm-hmm.
I really want to get into it myself, like the activism of it and stuff. And just myself, where I live out in Pennsylvania, I haven't found anybody in Pennsylvania. I'm out a little bit past Pittsburgh and stuff like that, in a small community town myself. And I've had some run-ins with some law enforcement. After hearings, I found out, they kind of screwed me over, but it was already too late in the long run, you know what I mean? So that's when I really started following J.C. Clayford and News Now Houston and stuff like that, and that's when I found you guys and started really listening.
Rob, Ed and I have talked about that phenomenon on our show where we have clients come to us who are in their, I don't know how old you are, but we have clients come to us who are in their 50s and 60s, and all their lives they have respected law enforcement, they have supported law enforcement, they're law-abiding members of the community.
Watch the news and believe everything you hear.
And then all of a sudden, especially firearms owners, which we represent many firearms owners, something happens to them regarding firearms, and I don't mean like crimes or anything, these basically administrative and technical laws they have regarding firearms. And then their opinion just transforms once they're the one that is involved. Because, and I'm not being judgmental about that, how do you know about these things until you're confronted with it?
Exactly. It is very hard. And like I have law enforcement in my family. Like my niece's husband's a law enforcement officer. My cousin's husband's a law enforcement officer, and we kind of have discussions all the time, and it's even for them, and they're both young. We're all in I'm 36, and they're, a lot of stuff like we were told from our parents and even our grandparents, a lot of stuff has changed through these times, and it is a difficult times. It's scary at times, and, do I respect cops? Yes, I respect their authority of what they're supposed to do by following the law and the Constitution. I'm not a cop supporter, just the good cops, because of just the run-ins that I've had with the police, other police that I've had, even my family members that are officers, they understand where I come from, because they understand that there are bad officers, but when a good officer covers that up, by not doing absolutely anything, it's so hard to get them out. To get a good, respectful officer in there. And even if they do, it's still hard for all of the past. No one still really trusts an officer, So it's like a catch-22, double-edged sword.
Well,
there are good,
I hope that this
bad.
I hope that this situation allows for and encourages what we term good cops to feel comfortable talking about officers that don't follow the Constitution. I hope that's a result of this.
Rob, we got to go.
Hey, Rob, if you can call us back next week and update us on a Brady list in Pennsylvania, that would be great.
I want you to be a regular viewer. Tell everybody you can to subscribe to our channel, which is the American News Media Center. And
I'd love to become a member myself.
Please, just American News Media Center on YouTube. And subscribe, and we go out to various other YouTube channels. But while you were on the phone, J.C. Playford tried to get in.
Okay.
And we're going to take a short call from J.C. because obviously his name was mentioned listen to JC and
Stay tuned, Rob, and
So now-
let's see what JC says.
JC, call in.
I will. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Now, going on what Rob said, I just want to add something. I just want to add,
Did you make notes while he was talking?
No.
Oh, okay. I didn't think I noticed that.
the problem starts with the training of the officers in the academy and what they're trained in. They're never trained in how to be nice. They're never trained in how to respect somebody with a camera.
I mean, never is a difficult word. We don't know.
Okay, this
It
is
seems like that.
speakerphone. Are you there? JC.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I thought
Nice.
I thought it was a pocket call. But let me just finish my thought for a minute. Training.
Yeah.
Officers in the city need to be rotated out to the suburbs, like 6 months in the city where there's hardcore activity. Give them an R&R and send them out to the suburbs. Take the suburban officers and put them into the city and see what policing is like there. Okay. Prohibit interference with the media or individual. Whatever, and when the road's closed, let the media get down there, let the media do their job, and let them get out, because I'm going to tell you, I heard it again yesterday morning. Some 13-year-old girl, some teenage girl, is the girl who had the cell phone who recorded the video in Minneapolis.
I thought she was 17.
Okay, but
same
there
principle.
was a female with a cell phone. And this goes back to who is going to be coming on right now, J.C. Playford, has been arguing and screaming in law enforcement's face for over 10 years, okay, saying, leave us alone. And I've always said, and it's shown up in newspaper articles in 2020, but it sounded, we were discussing the word narrative. In other words, the police want to control the narrative, the story. What happened, how did it happen, whatever. And every time they do that now, by controlling the narrative, a video comes out of the woodwork which proves the entire police report is a fabrication.
Well, I mean, they still control the narrative a lot because there are many crimes that there's no one recording it, there's nobody there, because you know, an officer arrives at a house for a domestic and chooses to arrest one party and not the other, and the other goes to court and says, but they started it, or they were just as bad. Nobody's listening, because the way the officer writes it up is the gospel once it gets to court.
I want to give you an example.
And nobody's recording that.
One morning, years ago, one morning in the
We do have to let JC talk.
JC, we're going to get to you.
Yeah.
One morning, early in the morning, 5, 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, I got notification that there was a medical police call at one corporate plaza in Hartford.
Mm-hmm.
And I pulled up in front of the building. It was like 6 o'clock in the morning. And I see the police cars and I see the ambulance parked in front of the building. So I walk up to the officer. I got my camera is rolling. And I said, yeah, you got, what do you got? He goes, lady had a heart attack. And I said, oh, I don't shoot heart attacks. And I shut my camera off. I started walking back to my car, and the gurney came out. And the gurney came out with a human being laying on the gurney with blood all over him. And I'm going, fuck, that's not a heart attack. So it was an old tube camera, so it had to warm up and get ready to shoot. And by the time my camera woman, I was able to step out in the road and get a picture of them closing the ambulance back doors and taking off from the scene. And that was the 19 seconds of video that sold to all of the networks in Connecticut, was the ambulance taken away with the doors closed.
So what are you up to,
JC?
Yeah, how you doing?
Good.
Good? A lot of shit going on,
Hear me?
JC.
Maybe I
Yes. A lot of shit going on. Go ahead.
Okay, first of all, I'd like to say this. All the stuff in Jacksonville, all charges have been dropped against all defendants.
Which defendants? The ones
On
that
the protest.
Protesters.
Got it.
Remember we were filming the protests and I was talking about the arrests that they were doing that were illegal and the crimes they were committing? Well, yesterday they dropped 48 different people from the arrest. They dropped all the charges except on one guy who was carrying a Molotov cocktail.
Because they can't prove or can't come up with a story about what happened. And they're
Well,
afraid.
it's going to be interesting because this is what they said. They said that is what forced them to drop the charges. The videos from people like me, the videos from the people who were there. After watching all the videos being put online, they determined that, oh fuck, it was us screwing up.
Yeah, it is.
And you know,
So they dropped.
it's not enough for people like JC or the 17-year-old girl in Minneapolis or anybody else out there that has a video recorder. It's not enough when it's only the police who have the body cameras,
guy.
because we know of an officer.
That put them in control.
Right, an officer in Hartford who is now trying to get his job back because of a completely separate incident was part of an IA, and they asked him why he turned his body camera off as other officers were kicking somebody on the ground.
No, he shut the dash cam off.
The dash cam.
He shut off the dash cam in
Right.
his cruiser.
And they asked him why he did that as other officers in front of his cruiser were kicking somebody, and he said, yes, thank you. He actually said to the IA investigator, I turned off my dash cam because of muscle memory. In other words, it's so instinctive for officers when something's going down that they don't want recorded, that they turn off their body camera, they turn off the dash cam. And so you can't just depend on officers' cameras because, again, they control the narrative. Go ahead, JC.
Well, here we go with this again, right? They want complete control, and I'm going to give you a prime example. The state of Florida basically is under complete control of the government when it comes to media. There's not a single local media person here in Jacksonville that ever asks the governor any questions when I'm there.
Mm-mm.
They don't even ask. They don't even try to ask anything. They just flat out refuse to ask a question. Okay, now this is where the narrative comes in. Let's say you and I go down to I show up at a scene. Okay, well here in Florida they have this thing where the fire department is keeping you 3 miles from your fucking fires. You have the police that are keeping you from these fires and from their crime scenes. And what's happening, and you see it every single day on the local news, video courtesy of St. Johns County Sheriff, picture courtesy of government so-and-so, picture so-and-so, so-and-so. The press release that they do is word for word coming from the government, and the media here is fine with that. Okay, when you get into the citizen review boards, remember, it was I, during Occupy, that caught the assistant chief of San Diego dealing with Occupy at the Citizens Review Board, drunk off his ass. They fired him. I caught him.
Well,
He was
you know,
being held up by
JC,
two other officers.
JC,
I couldn't even sit up straight.
gotta ask you a question.
Citizen Review Board. You know who else was there? The FBI. Why does the FBI show up at Citizen Review Board and sit with the local government when they're supposed to be looking at the local government? They hold these meetings for these Citizen Review Boards. They're handpicked by the cops, the people who sit on them, okay? The local city attorneys at them, the local police chiefs at them. Why? So
Stop,
they can get a
stop.
head start on what might be coming down
Okay.
their throat.
Stop.
For how to
JC,
divert it.
in San Diego, there are basically I believe two civilian review boards. One handles the sheriff's
That's
department,
on the sheriffs.
one handles county and sheriff, and the other handles the city. But he's right. These are political appointees, and I gotta tell you, it's hard for a politician to go up against the police union or a firefighters union.
That's why all politicians support the police.
Exactly.
Because you can't come out and say, I hate the cops, I want them fixed, because they work every.
You're starting to get more active in Jacksonville, correct?
Say that again?
You are starting to become more active in the St. Johns County, Jacksonville area of Florida.
Yes, we are.
Okay.
We've been getting real busy lately.
Okay. I'll talk to you sometime later today or tomorrow about a move we need to make.
Okay. And now, there's another one. We brought up the Brady list.
Yes, that's the subject
Okay.
for today. One of them.
We have been fighting about the Brady list for how many years to make them available to the public? State of California made it impossible for people to see the Brady list. That's a blue state. Guess what other state made it impossible? New York, another blue state. Oh, but here, let's open this up. You know, it's a crying shame that what we're finding is that the states that have the hardest
JC, I'm going to leave it with this. I'm going to leave it with this. The state of Connecticut passed a law exempting the state police from anybody being able to look at a state trooper's disciplinary file. But we got another call coming in, JC.
Bye,
Talk to
JC.
you.
So while you're handling that, we'll keep up with the main story of the day, the Brady list. We
Yeah.
can be interrupted as things go on, but we already talked about what led our attention to the Brady list
Right.
issue in January of 2014.
Right.
So I wrote a letter to the chief state's attorney.
Oh, that's so many judges.
I wrote a letter to the chief state's attorney asking for any policies and procedures in the state of Connecticut that keeps a list of credibility problems with police officers.
What date did you write that letter?
January 27, 2014.
Oh, 14?
Yeah.
That's 6 years ago.
Oh, is it? 6 years.
6 years ago. January, 6.5 years.
Yeah.
Five and a half years, 6.5 years.
Okay. And I received a response from the Office of the Chief State's Attorney dated February 11, 2014. And I won't read the whole thing. I'll just get to the
Go
bottom
to the
line.
verses. We're working on it pretty soon.
The division does not have any administrative policies or the division is currently contemplating the establishment of such policy. Well, it's nice that 6 years ago, prosecutors in Connecticut were contemplating following and abiding by the United States Constitution. I'm glad they were contemplating that.
I heard a black attorney discussing, being interviewed. It's the same guy that showed up in Wethersfield. And here's what he said, and unfortunately, I think he's correct. There's going to be another incident of another police firearms issue in the next 30 days. That's his prediction. There's going to be another incident similar to these in the next 30 days. And I happen to agree. These situations are not going away.
Well, last week we listened to an audio of you at, I believe, a city council meeting in Hartford where we were discussing the Civilian Review Board.
That was a meeting the mayor had with the North End community, the minority community
Yes.
on North Main
Thank
Street
you.
in Hartford. And he showed up, was it after an incident? He showed up to try and calm the neighborhood down, so to speak, and say, look, you know, here's the police chief, I'm the mayor, we're going to solve the problems and everything. And then he went on and gutted the police review board. But let's take.
Let me just correct you. I know what it was. It was right after President Trump was elected, and Hartford's a very democratic city, political party speaking, and everybody was worried about illegal immigrants and what was going to happen with the new administration. And so the mayor of Hartford was going around to the different communities talking about sanctuary cities. Go ahead.
Okay, we got to take a phone call.
Okay, let's see how we do on this one. We're getting
Speakerphone.
better, I think.
Hello, who are we speaking to?
My name is Eli. I'm calling from Naples, Florida.
Hey, Naples, Florida.
Very nice. Hi, Eli. Thanks for calling.
First, this is my second
time watching you guys, and you guys are doing a wonderful job. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
One thing I like to say about the police department, I was born in Haiti.
Yep.
When I was in Haiti, I had no freedom with the police department, and I know we could not even seek or try to defend ourselves. Whatever they say, it was yes or no. We could not defend ourselves. And now I'm living in America. I know what it is not to have freedom, and now we are fighting to have this freedom so we don't let people take it away from us.
Well said.
Eli, I can't agree with you more. It's somebody who comes in from an oppressive government to the United States who says, wow, what a breath of fresh air. Until you start having issues based on race, and I believe that there is some of that going on,
A lot of it.
going on, but one thing that you'll know in watching this show, Rachel and I have an unwavering support for law enforcement, but we don't support bad police officers. We don't support them. We won't support them. End conversation. We have very close friends who are in law enforcement, and that's what we got to do.
So Eli, do you know if Florida has a Brady list or not?
I don't know if they have a Brady list. I don't know. But next time when you guys have the show, I probably would have the answer.
Yes, report back
Now,
to us next week.
Eli,
That would be great.
What YouTube channel do you watch us through?
News Now Houston. I love him. He does a great
Okay,
job.
no, and
Excellent.
Dave great. 4 words, American News Media Center, and subscribe to our channel.
Yes, I will. Also, I'd like to say one thing. I know you guys are talking, I work in healthcare. I know you guys are talking about making change. Until we have somebody in the police department to actually watch over the police department, it's going to be very hard. I'm not saying we can't do it. We need to have somebody in the police department watching over the police. That's the best way, I believe, we can actually make changes so we can have better policing in America.
Thank you. More.
I agree.
And it's it's not as if we don't have people now supposedly. I mean, police departments have internal affairs, and some cities have police commissions or civilian review boards. But at the beginning of our show, we talked about all the problems with that, and that needs to be fixed because it looks like there are safeguards in place. It needs to be fixed.
Eli, what do you do for a living in Naples, Florida?
Healthcare.
Healthcare. Now, does that mean
I'm an X-ray tech. I've been an X-ray tech for 15 years.
you know that I had a...
No, I didn't know that.
I met a lot of health techs.
Right. He's met a lot of people.
They were
in the
taking
healthcare.
X-rays in my chest probably 4 times a day. I bet you I'd probably glow if they shut the lights off now. But I appreciate people in the healthcare field. Did you get laid off, or did you work straight through the COVID-19?
Fortunately, worked through it.
Well,
Safely worked through it.
Yes.
Good.
Well, thank you.
Congratulations. Thank you for your service.
Thank you for your service. And keep watching, okay?
Thank you, guys.
Keep watching. Call in. If you hear something, call in. Talk about it. We're open to suggestions.
Well, he said he might call back next
Yeah.
week and report on a Brady list in Florida.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yes.
Bye, Eli.
Bye, Eli.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay.
So I had asked, and I read this,
Yeah.
that they were contemplating the establishment of a policy, and we followed up and we got information through the Freedom of Information Act from the state police about this particular officer who had the administrative leave and was under investigation, and we weren't told until the day before the trial. And it turns out that through the Freedom of Information Act request, we got an email that went out a year prior to like 30 or 40 people in the state police, informing them that this officer was on suspension and he didn't have any police powers.
So don't, if he's speeding, pinch him. If he comes up to you and acts like a policeman, he's not.
Now, why wasn't that email distributed to prosecutors? Why wasn't it distributed to the chief state's attorney, or maybe it was?
Or put into an email to the prosecutor's office in their jurisdiction, and it goes into a Brady book,
And-
alphabetized.
Or maybe it was, but it was never told to defense attorneys, that's for sure.
You know that prosecutors are attempting to protect members of law enforcement.
Well, I hate to say it. I mean, I was a prosecutor for 8 years, and so I speak from experience. Many prosecutors do see it as somebody gets arrested for disorderly, absolutely did. The prosecutor doesn't want to just drop the case, because then it opens the police officer up to a lawsuit, a civil rights lawsuit. So let's get a plea for the infraction of trespass or creating public disturbance. It won't give you a criminal record. It doesn't really harm anything. So let's do that. And the client's going to say, okay, I'll pay a $90 fine, rather than come back to court 10 times before the trial ever comes, before I even get the chance to file any motions, because they're only heard at trial, so they wear me down, so I, plead or take a deal. Before I have to pay my attorney $20,000, $30,000, let me just pay the $90 fine and get out of here. And when you plead to anything, then your civil rights case is lost. You have to prevail, and pleading even to an infraction, you don't prevail. That's the game that's played. And the prosecutors should not be there to protect the police. That should not be their job. In fact, they should form a means of oversight over the police, because their goal should be justice. And if a police officer makes an arrest and it's unjust and violates the Constitution, the prosecutor should be the first one pointing it out, not the defense attorney.
These prosecutors, as part of their employment, usually speak to certain officers in certain departments on a regular basis.
Yep.
They get personally, who knows, they may socialize with them, I don't know, but a prosecutor is always in touch with members of law enforcement about the cases on his desk. And I'm sure that they have favorite officers. And when that officer gets jammed up, I'm going to do everything I can to help this officer. But they don't, what the one caveat they don't say is, I'm going to do everything above board to help this officer. You can't not divulge information to the to the defense, hoping to ruin. Example, a police officer gets jammed up for a very serious crime, and they delay the report, or they delay the trial of the officer until all of his cases, important cases, have cleared the docket. Because if he gets found guilty today, somebody that's got a case pending where he's the lead officer is going to say, wait a minute. So that's one of the reasons why the Brady list should be there. You've said previously that there should be a period of time after a person is arraigned, 30 days, where the defense counsel can file to be heard any motions
that goes to constitutional issues.
Right.
The evidence was seized illegally, and therefore it should be suppressed and not able to be used at trial. And if you don't have the evidence, then this case has to be dropped. Why can't that happen sooner rather than 18 months, where some clients can't wait that long to resolve their case? They don't have the money, they don't have the time, they get frustrated.
Why is it that people go into the system only to be told on the eve of trial, we're going to drop the charges? You could have made that fucking decision 18 months ago.
And most clients, because as an attorney, you can't tell the client, well, let's call their bluff. Let's wait. Don't accept any offer, and they'll drop it the day before trial because you don't know that for sure. So
No.
you can't guarantee that to a client.
That's right.
And so the client is uncertain, afraid they may, go to trial, and there is a penalty for going to trial. If you go to trial and lose, you're going to get more of a punishment than if you just took a
Well,
deal.
not all the time.
Well, there are exceptions to
No, no,
everything,
no, no.
I guess.
No. May 1st, 1990, I got caught by Trooper Timko, and he said that I was doing like 95 and a 55. I was on the way to the Ryan's Deli fire. And I blew right past him on the highway. I went to the fire, started shooting. After it was all over, he gave me a ticket for speeding. So I went into the court. They knew who I was. And the prosecutor said to me, well, Ed, are you going to be paying the fine today? I said, oh, just like that? You expect me to pay the fine? What's the fine? And I think at the time it was like $255.
Sounds about right.
And I said, well, let me ask you a question. I said, what's the maximum fine? And they said, $255. I said, so you want me to plead guilty and pay $255? They said, yeah. I said, fuck you. Go. You're going to have to work for it. I want a trial. And you can't increase the amount over the maximum.
No, you can't.
Okay? So the most you're going to get from me is $255. Work for it. Okay? And then on the day of trial, the judge dismissed my charge, so to speak, and sent me home. Can you imagine walking into a judge and saying, they ask you, plead innocent or guilty? Guilty or not guilty? And I said, well, and I knew the judge was watching. I said, nah, that's kind of tough. I came here and I wanted to plead guilty. But because of what's happened, I got to plead not guilty. And right away, the judge from the bench goes, what? You came here to plead guilty and you're forced to plead not guilty? I said, yeah. He says, what's that all about? And so they're giving everybody else community service or reduce it to
Which
violated
they do,
state,
if
which
you-
they're doing all the time.
Yeah.
And the prosecutor the judge looks at the prosecutor and says, did you offer Mr. Peruta anything? And she goes, no. And she says, why? I said, well, Your Honor, look, this is the way.
You must have struck her the wrong way.
This is the way it is. No, I had just come out of that big trial in Enfield.
Oh, so they knew who you were.
Yeah. So I said, this is the way this is working, Your Honor. I know that I was going faster than 55 miles an hour. Like the officer says, like the trooper says. I said, but there's no way I was going 93 miles an hour. And so the judge looked at me and said, well, what do you suggest? I said, I'll plead guilty to doing 56 and a 55. The plea, 56 and a 55, bangs his judge and says, no fines, no nothing, go home.
Let's get back to what we were talking about.
Did you ever get a ticket in the last 3 years? Yeah, doing 56 and a 55. Go ahead.
The duty of prosecutors.
Yeah.
I mean, and I want to take it up the next level to judges. I've represented people who have no criminal history, have not yet been convicted of anything, they're innocent until proven guilty, and you stand in court next to them, and the prosecutors say their guns and don't let them out of the house and send them to anger management and do all this stuff, even though the person hasn't been convicted yet. But just try to stand in court and give it back to the prosecutor and say, this officer hit my client overhead. This officer,
we're not the time for
no,
that.
we're not going to talk about the police that way.
We're not here to argue the case.
It's only one way. The prosecutor gets to say all this crap about your client, but you just try to go back and say something about the police.
Okay.
It's not happening.
Pay attention. We've got about 7 minutes left.
Okay.
So we're going to have to watch
So let me wind this whole Brady issue up, at least for today. October 12th, 2016. How long is that after February 11th, 2014, when the Chief State's Attorney's Office was contemplating, following the U.S. Constitution? Do we have a call? Well, can I just finish this up, though?
Rachel's going to finish. Go ahead.
Yeah. So October 12th, 2016, I wrote again to Kevin Kane, the Chief State's Attorney, and I said, by the way, you told me back in February the establishment of the know you had an article in the Connecticut Law Tribune and stuff about, changes at the state's attorney's office. I'm just wondering, in the last 2 years, has a policy been formed? I don't think I ever got a response to that letter. I'm assuming the answer is no, because I still haven't heard of one. And I copied that letter to Michael Lawler, who at that time was, I don't know, the Undersecretary for Criminal Policy in Connecticut.
Government stroker.
Yeah, and now he's like a professor at the University of New Haven. Never heard from him either about this issue. So it's time, Connecticut, to address this.
No, listen. It's time for the country.
True.
See,
Sorry.
if you make it a federal decision, it's got very few people who can vote yes, yay, or nay. The House, the Senate, and the President, okay? If you try to piecemeal this like postage stamps all over the country, it's crazy. Because right now, I believe there's a lot of communities who are clamoring for some kind of body to hold police accountable. Call it a police review board, call it whatever you wanna, but there's people all over the country acts quickly, efficiently, and resolve issues whichever way it falls, on whatever side of the fence it falls. It has to fall out that way.
Yeah, we have a 26-minute video from not for today, 26-minute video from the second meeting of the Civilian Review Board in Hartford that you and I ever went to.
Yeah.
And you pulled up to the table. There were 8 or 9 people there. Hartford Corporation Counsel was there, Fox and the Hen House, of course. And then there were 2 police officers from
Internal Affairs
there. And you pulled yourself up to the table and you told that Civilian Review Board all the information that Corporation Counsel had been withholding from them. You told them that the representative from Corporation Counsel, a secretary or assistant who had been there, was giving reports that their investigators were doing a great job when in fact the Civilian Review Board didn't
wanted to replace them.
You opened their eyes to all these things that had been going on.
But the the Mayor Bronin said to certain people, you have to leave, and then appointed his own people who did shit.
Right.
The Civilian Review Board in the city of Hartford has done squat shit.
Mayor Bronin, if you even start to talk about Civilian Review Boards,
I'm going to be right
we're
up
going
his
to be
ass.
right back there.
I'm going to be right with a camera and microphone and doing whatever. Listen, 3 minutes left. I'm going to cut it off.
Well, let me just tell people, these letters that I've been citing about our efforts in Connecticut to get a Brady list going, I'm going to post a link to them at our Summary Judgment YouTube site. And if you show me how to do it, the American News, what is it called?
Yeah, AmericanNewsNetwork.com.
No, the YouTube site. You want everybody to sign.
American News Media Center.
American News Media Center. You show me how to do it there, although we don't have a community page, so I'm not sure we'll be able to do it. But it will be at Summary Judgment Talk Show on the community page. I'll put a link to the Civilian Review Board 26-minute video we have, and to the documents that I've been
Is JC still on the phone?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good. Let's wind it up with JC.
Let's wind it up with JC. Speakerphone. JC, you still there?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
We cannot, if we do not start addressing the crimes that the judges are committing on their bench, allowing them to happen,
Yes.
not holding them accountable, and the district attorneys that are covering their asses. Until we fix all 3 of those departments, none of them will ever be fixed. They've got to be done at the same time.
The problem starts at the top and has to get fixed from the bottom.
You know what I'm going to be interested in, JC? I've seen some of these protesters protesting in front of courthouses. And when these courthouses open back up, whenever they open back up for the public, are people going to go in there? People who are now demonstrating Black Lives Matter and people that are supporting the movement, are they going to go into these courthouses and are they going to stand when a judge walks in the courtroom, or are they going to take a knee like a lot of the protesters have been doing? That's going to be interesting.
I'm not standing for any more judges.
No, I'm not either.
There's any corrupt ones out there.
I'm not going to take a kneel, but I'm not going to stand up when they say all rise.
Yeah, it'd be hard to get up from a kneel for you, I think.
I know. Listen, we're out of here. JC, talk to you next week.
Everybody have a good week. We're winding it up. That's it.
Okay.
All right.